At the long oak table, under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, Natalie Carter sat quietly, pretending not to hear her father-in-law's words. "Women don't belong in business discussions," Robert Carter declared, carving his turkey with sharp precision. "Especially unemployed ones like you." He didn't even look at her as he reached for the wine bottle. Her husband, Lucas, froze mid-bite, his fork suspended in the air, while his mother smiled approvingly. His brother, Dean, chuckled under his breath. 17 people filled the grand dining room of the Carter family estate in Connecticut, but Natalie was the only one who seemed invisible. Robert continued, his voice booming over the clink of silverware. "Lucas, after dinner, we'll discuss the Westwood account. Just the men. We'll use my study." Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe Natalie should." Dean cut him off with a loud laugh. "Include who? Your wife? What's she going to contribute? Shopping tips?" Their mother, Elaine, smiled sweetly. "I'm sure Natalie understands. Business is so dull for women. We can plan the charity gala instead." Natalie's smile was polite but tight. She took a slow sip of wine, the rich Bordeaux calming her nerves as her phone buzzed silently in her lap. It was a message from her assistant, Tessa. "Mrs. Carter, I'm seeing alarming activity on Carter Manufacturing's account. Their CFO just sent Q4 projections. They're worse than expected. Should I prepare termination paperwork?" Natalie's thumb hovered over her screen. One word from her could end Carter Manufacturing's lifeline, the contract that kept them afloat. They had no idea the unemployed daughter-in-law sitting at their table owned the logistics firm that handled 73% of their business operations. She took a deep breath and typed back, "Not yet. I'll handle it Monday." "Natalie, are you listening?" Elaine's sharp tone snapped her back. "I was saying you can organize the silent auction. You've got so much free time." Natalie smiled faintly. "Sorry, just checking a message." Robert pointed his fork in her direction. "See? Always distracted. That's why women shouldn't be in business. Phones and gossip. When we meet, we focus. That's what makes men successful." Dean raised his glass. "To successful men and the women who stay in their lane." Laughter echoed around the table, except from Lucas, who looked like he wished the floor would open and swallow him whole. Natalie's phone buzzed again. "Tessa, ma'am, their CFO sounds panicked. He's begging for a call to renegotiate next quarter's terms." She typed quickly under the table. "Tell him contract talks go through me directly. I'll call Monday." Elaine's voice interrupted again. "Phone's away, dear. It's rude." Natalie smiled politely. "Of course, my apologies." She slipped the phone into her purse, but not before adding one last message. "Tessa, pull every document related to Carter Manufacturing, contracts, payments, communications. Have it ready Monday morning." Robert began one of his favorite speeches. "That's how business is done," he said proudly. "Firm handshakes, face-to-face deals. None of this email nonsense. 40 years of Carter Manufacturing, built on integrity and relationships." Dean nodded eagerly. "Dad's right. That's why the company's still standing." Natalie placed her wineglass down softly. "Actually," she said, her tone calm, "it's still standing because of Carter Logistics Group." The room fell silent. Forks froze midair. Robert frowned. "What did you just say?" "Carter Logistics Group," Natalie repeated. "The company handling your warehousing, freight coordination, and distribution. The one that extended your credit when your bank wouldn't. The company that saved you from bankruptcy 18 months ago." Dean's face reddened. "What does that have to do with anything?" Natalie's voice was even. "Everything. Because I own it. I'm the founder and CEO." Silence blanketed the table. Lucas turned to her slowly, eyes wide. "Natalie, what?" "I started it 6 years ago," she said, meeting his gaze. 2 years before we met." Elaine's jaw dropped. "That's impossible. You're home all day." Natalie gave a small, patient smile. "I work from home. I manage a company with 140 employees across 4 offices. Last year, we did $47 million in revenue." Robert's hand trembled around his fork. "You're lying." Natalie took out her phone, ignoring Elaine's gasp. Here's your CFO's signature, she said, showing him the screen. 18 months ago, you signed an $8.4 million annual contract with us, 3 weeks before you would have gone under. Dean snatched the phone, scrolling rapidly. His face drained of color. Dad, she's right. This is our account. Natalie leaned back in her chair. Carter Manufacturing was sinking. I heard you talking at Lucas's office party about cash flow issues. My team ran an analysis. We offered a solution, at 40% below market rate, to keep you alive. Robert's voice cracked. Why would you do that? Natalie looked at Lucas. Because I loved your son. And I believed in your family. Lucas's hand reached for hers under the table. I had no idea, he whispered. Natalie smiled faintly. You never asked. The room was heavy with disbelief. Jennifer's name flashed again on her phone, and she answered on speaker. Yes, Tessa? Ma'am, Carter Manufacturing's CFO is requesting an emergency meeting. He says they can't sustain the current contract and need to renegotiate immediately. Natalie's voice was steady. What's he asking for? Extended payment terms, reduced fees, 6-month deferment. Thank you. Tell him I'll review it Monday. All eyes were on Natalie as she ended the call. The air in the dining room felt heavier than the turkey aroma that still lingered. Robert cleared his throat, his voice suddenly unsure. Termination clauses? He repeated. You wouldn't actually. Your company is in serious trouble, Natalie said firmly. And you know it. Dean leaned forward, his face tense. The Henderson account is strong. We'll bounce back. Natalie shook her head. Henderson Industries already decided to leave you 2 weeks ago. They're switching to overseas manufacturing. You can't compete with their pricing. Robert's knife clattered against his plate. How do you even know that? Because Henderson is my client, Natalie said simply. My company manages their entire East Coast logistics. When they mentioned leaving you, I tried to talk them out of it, but your delivery times have become unreliable. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. You're saying you've been helping us this whole time? Natalie nodded. For 18 months, yes. My company has absorbed costs, expedited shipments at our expense, and covered your mistakes with our reputation. Robert's voice was a whisper now. Why? Because you're my husband's family, she said softly. I believed that loyalty meant something. Dean stared at her. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, Natalie corrected. Every time Lucas mentioned my work, you changed the subject. Every time I spoke about business, you ignored me. You decided I didn't belong. The only sound was the soft clink of someone setting down a glass. Dean suddenly grabbed his phone. Dad, she's telling the truth, he muttered, scrolling quickly. She's on Forbes. Top 15 logistics innovators in the Northeast. Robert blinked. Forbes? Yes, Natalie said. They profiled me last year. But you wouldn't have noticed. You assumed anything business-related couldn't possibly involve me. Elaine's tears spilled. We were blind. Natalie sighed. No, you were comfortable. You liked the idea of me being small. Easier that way. Her phone buzzed again. Tessa. Ma'am, their CFO keeps calling. He sounds desperate. What should I tell him? Natalie looked around the table at the stunned faces and typed back. Tell him I'll decide Monday. Robert finally spoke, voice shaking. Please, Natalie, don't end the contract. We need you. She looked him squarely in the eye. You've needed me for 1.5 years. You just didn't know it. Dean's jaw clenched. We know now. Natalie exhaled slowly. That's the problem. Now you only see me because your survival depends on it. Lucas reached for her hand again. Nat, I'm sorry. I should have asked about your work. I assumed. She looked at him, eyes calm but distant. Yes. You assumed. Like everyone else. The silence stretched long and thick across the table. Elaine finally whispered. We were wrong. All of us. Natalie nodded slightly. You were. And I'm not angry about ignorance. I'm angry about arrogance. Robert lowered his gaze. What can we do? Natalie thought for a long moment, then said, You can start by treating me with respect. Not as Lucas's wife, but as a businesswoman whose expertise matters. Dean stood. You have my apology. I've been an ass. Elaine dabbed her eyes. I'm sorry, dear. We all are. Robert swallowed hard. I am too. You deserve better. Natalie pushed her chair back. I'll need time to think about what comes next for the business and for this family. Lucas's voice broke the quiet. Are you leaving me? He asked softly. Natalie shook her head. No, I'm leaving this dinner. I need air. She picked up her purse and turned toward the door. Lucas, stay. You still have your meeting to plan, the Henderson account, your strategy, whatever's next. Natalie, wait, Lucas said, rising from his chair. Please. She paused just long enough to meet his eyes. I'm not walking out on our marriage, Lucas. I'm walking away from a room that only values me when I'm useful. Then she left the dining room, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving behind a stunned silence. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Natalie wrapped her coat tighter and walked to her car parked under the glittering lights of the estate driveway. Her phone rang before she could start the engine. Tessa, she said, answering. Ma'am, her assistant replied, the Carter Manufacturing CFO is calling every few minutes. He says it's urgent. What should I tell him? Natalie looked through the windshield, her reflection faint against the mansion's glowing windows. Tell him Carter Logistics will honor the current contract through the end of the fiscal year, she said slowly. After that, we'll renegotiate at market rate. Tessa hesitated. Understood. And ma'am, you handled that perfectly. Like a boss. Natalie's lips curved into a faint smile. That's because I am the boss, she said, ending the call. For a long moment, she sat still, her fingers resting on the steering wheel, her mind replaying the evening. Every insult, every dismissive glance, every laugh at her expense, it all echoed in her memory. But so did the moment of realization on their faces. They finally saw her, not as the quiet wife, but as the woman who'd been holding their empire together without recognition. She drove home in silence, the roads empty under the pale moonlight. The Connecticut countryside blurred past, her thoughts clearer with every mile. When she reached the house, she parked in the driveway and sat for a moment longer, gazing at the windows glowing softly against the night. That house had always felt like a place of waiting for validation, for acknowledgement, for respect. But tonight it felt different. Tonight it was hers. She stepped inside, hung her coat, and walked straight to her office, the room Lucas thought she used for hobbies. Her office was quiet, the faint hum of her computer breaking the silence. She sat at her desk and opened her company dashboard. Charts, numbers, and performance graphs filled the screen, real evidence of what she'd built. $47 million in annual revenue, 140 employees, partnerships across the Northeast. Her empire, created piece by piece while her in-laws debated recipes and golf games. She opened a new document labeled Carter Manufacturing Review. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. It wasn't just a business decision anymore, it was personal. Natalie began typing notes for Monday's executive meeting. Evaluate viability of client relationship. Assess overdue invoices. Determine continuation or termination criteria. Her jaw tightened. For years, she had supported that family quietly, believing kindness would earn respect. Tonight had shown her the truth. Respect wasn't given freely. It had to be claimed. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the page. She typed one final line, new policy, no discounts for disrespect. Then she leaned back and exhaled, a small, satisfied smile touching her lips. Upstairs, she heard Lucas come in much later that night. His footsteps were hesitant, careful. He paused outside her office door before knocking softly. Natalie. She looked up from her laptop. Come in. Lucas stepped inside, shoulders slumped. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, she said gently. He nodded. I was blind. I never asked because I didn't think I had to. You always seemed so calm, so in control. I just assumed that I was idle, she finished for him. He winced. Yes. Natalie's eyes softened slightly. You're not the first man to make that assumption. But you're the one who should have known better. Lucas sat down across from her. I don't care about the money or the company. I just don't want to lose you. She studied him for a long moment. You won't lose me, Lucas. But things will change. I'm done hiding what I've built. He nodded slowly. I understand. For the first time that night, his words sounded genuine. He looked around her office, truly seeing it, the awards, the strategy boards, the quiet strength in every detail. They sat in silence for a while before Lucas said, Dad wants to meet with you tomorrow. Natalie shook her head. Not tomorrow. Monday. In my office, not his. He nodded again. He'll hate that. He can learn humility, she said simply. Lucas smiled faintly, almost in admiration. You were incredible tonight. No, she said softly. I was honest. That's what scares people most. Lucas reached across the desk, taking her hand. I'm proud of you. She met his eyes. Good. Now try to keep up. When Lucas left the room, Natalie stayed awake long after midnight. The glow of her computer screen painted soft light across her face as she reviewed contracts, charts, and emails. Each file told a story, one of effort, resilience, and quiet victories. Her life had been dismissed because it didn't fit their version of ambition. But success wasn't about loud declarations. It was about consistency. And she had been consistent every single day. She closed her laptop at last and whispered to herself, They finally know who I am. Monday morning arrived sooner than expected. At 8 a.m., Natalie sat at the head of her conference table. Her executive team gathered around, sharp suits, notepads open. We're reviewing the Carter manufacturing account, she began. It's our largest client, but also our weakest link. Tessa projected the figures on screen. Late payments, rising costs, declining performance. If this were any other client, Tessa said, we'd have dropped them months ago. Natalie nodded. Exactly. Family blinded my judgment. That ends today. The team exchanged looks of quiet respect. Their boss had never sounded more resolute. By noon, Natalie's phone buzzed again. Robert Carter. She hesitated before answering. Mr. Carter. Natalie, please, he began. I wanted to say again how sorry I am for everything. Apology accepted, she said. But this is business now. If Carter Manufacturing wants to continue our partnership, new terms apply, market rate pricing, strict deadlines, and payment enforcement. No exceptions. Robert sighed heavily. Understood. Can we meet in person? Of course, Natalie replied. At my office. Wednesday morning. At yours, he repeated, surprised. Yes, she said firmly. It's time the Carter men saw where the real work happens. When Wednesday came, Robert, Dean, and Lucas walked into Carter Logistics headquarters. Modern glass walls, sleek design, and employees who greeted Natalie with deference. She walked them through the office herself. This is what I've built while you assumed I was doing nothing, she said. Robert looked around, visibly humbled. I had no idea. That's the point, Natalie replied. In the conference room, she laid out the revised contract. These are the new terms. You'll find them fair but firm. Dean scanned the pages. This is generous, he admitted. You didn't have to. I know, she said, but I choose to. The meeting ended with handshakes, real ones, not the condescending gestures of old. As the men left, Robert paused by the door. You saved us, he said quietly. Again. Natalie met his eyes. Then remember who you're talking to next Thanksgiving. He nodded, eyes glistening. We will. When they were gone, she turned toward the window. The city skyline stretched before her, a reminder of how far she'd come. Respect, once denied, had finally been earned. Not through words, but through undeniable proof. That night, Natalie returned home and stood in her office doorway. The framed Forbes article hung neatly on the wall. Natalie Carter, the quiet force behind a billion-dollar supply chain. She smiled. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. Not her husband's, not his family's. She had already built her legacy. As she sat down at her desk, her phone buzzed with a new message from Tessa. Congratulations, ma'am. You just made Forbes' top 100 CEOs list. Natalie laughed softly. They're finally paying attention. And for the first time in years, she felt perfectly, powerfully seen.